The setup Harrison Blake stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold and white. At 38, he had everything a man could want: a tech empire worth $3 billion, properties on 3 continents, and a reputation that opened every door in New York. Everything except someone who saw past the fortune to the person underneath. "You're doing it again," Trevor Walsh said from across the table, his attorney's voice cutting through Harrison's thoughts. "Doing what?" "That thing where you mentally check out when someone's talking to you." "Ashley just left, by the way, in case you didn't notice." Harrison turned back to find his date's chair empty, her napkin tossed on the table in clear frustration. He hadn't even heard her leave. That made 5 women in 2 months who'd walked out on him. "Let me guess," Miles Crawford added, signaling the waiter for another round of drinks. "She started talking about redecorating your Hamptons house after 3 dates?" The confrontation. Harrison loosened his tie, suddenly feeling suffocated by the restaurant's pretentious atmosphere. She started pricing out furniture before the appetizers arrived. $10,000 for a couch. She hadn't even seen the house yet. "And you told her exactly what you thought about that," Trevor said. Not as a question, but as a statement of fact. "I was honest." "Is that a crime?" Miles leaned forward, his restaurant owner's instincts reading the room. "There's honest, and then there's brutal. You have a gift for the latter, so I'm supposed to lie? Pretend I'm okay with someone spending my money before we've even established what we are?" "You're supposed to have a conversation like a normal human being," Trevor replied. "Not conduct an interrogation about her motives and financial expectations over Chilean sea bass." Harrison downed the rest of his whiskey, feeling the familiar burn of frustration. "Every single woman I meet looks at me and sees a bank account with a heartbeat. They don't want Harrison Blake. They want the lifestyle, the status, the security." "The challenge that's not fair," Miles protested. "Not every woman is like that, really." "Name one." The silence that followed proved Harrison's point, or so he thought. Trevor and Miles exchanged glances, having this same conversation with their friend at least once a month for the past 3 years. "You want to know what I think?" Trevor said, setting down his glass with deliberate force. "I think you've turned cynicism into a shield. You assume the worst about everyone before they have a chance to prove you wrong." "I think he's afraid," Miles added. "Afraid that if he actually lets someone in, they might hurt him the way Rebecca did." The mention of his ex-fiancée from 10 years ago made Harrison's jaw tighten. Rebecca had been different, or so he'd believed. They'd met before Blake Industries went public, when he was just another programmer with big dreams. She'd seemed to love him for who he was. Then the company exploded, the money flooded in. And suddenly she had opinions about everything from his wardrobe to his friends. When she'd been photographed kissing a Hollywood producer at a charity gala, claiming Harrison was too busy building his empire to build a relationship, something inside him had frozen over. "It has nothing to do with Rebecca," Harrison said coldly. "Everything you do has to do with Rebecca," Trevor countered. "You've spent a decade proving that you're right about women being superficial. You've become so good at finding evidence for your theory that you've forgotten how to actually connect with anyone." The Batarisan stood abruptly, throwing down his platinum card. "Fine, you want to prove me wrong? Let's make this interesting." "Oh no," Miles groaned. "I know that tone." $1 million, Harrison announced, loud enough that nearby tables turned to stare. "I bet $1 million that there isn't a woman in this entire city who can spend one night in conversation with me without running away or asking for money." "You've lost your mind," Trevor hissed, trying to quiet him down. "Have I? You think I'm wrong about human nature? Prove it. Find me one woman who can handle complete honesty for one night. No games, no manipulation, no false charm. Just me, exactly as I am." Miles rubbed his temples. "And what does handling you entail exactly?" "Simple rules," Harrison continued, warming to his idea. "She spends the evening at my penthouse. Oh, we talk. I'm completely honest about everything I think and feel. No filters, no social niceties. If she makes it until sunrise without leaving, insulting me, or asking for money, she wins the $1 million. "This is insane," Trevor said. "You're literally gambling that you're impossible to spend time with." "I'm gambling that I'm right about people's motivations. When money's on the table, true character reveals itself. The unlikely volunteer, what Harrison didn't know was that 3 floors below, in the service corridors of the restaurant building, someone had heard every word of his challenge. Natalie Rivers pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway, her mind racing. She'd been emptying trash near the restaurant's private dining rooms when Harrison's voice had carried through the ventilation system. The building's old architecture created unexpected acoustic channels, and she'd learned months ago that conversations from certain tables could be heard in specific maintenance areas. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop. But once she'd heard $1 million, stopping listening became impossible. Natalie paused in front of a window overlooking the Hudson River, seeing her reflection in the glass. At 29, she looked older than her years. Working 2 jobs while caring for her father had etched lines around her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. Her architecture degree from Columbia hung on a wall at home, expensive piece of paper that did nothing to pay for her father's cancer treatments. The decision, $1 million. The number echoed in her mind like a prayer and a curse. That money could cover all her father's experimental treatments. It could pay off the second mortgage on their house. It could buy her enough time to actually use her degree instead of cleaning buildings she'd once dreamed of designing, but was it worth spending a night with an arrogant billionaire who saw women as obstacles to overcome? Natalie thought about her father, Robert Rivers, who'd raised her alone after her mother died when she was 8. He'd worked construction for 30 years, built skyscrapers with his own hands, only to be diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 6 months after retirement. The irony was cruel. He'd finally had time to enjoy life, and his body had betrayed him. "What would you do, Dad?" she whispered to her reflection. She already knew the answer. Her father had taught her that dignity wasn't about pride. It was about doing what needed to be done without compromising who you were. If this Harrison Blake wanted honesty, she could give him honesty. If he wanted someone who wouldn't be intimidated by his money or his attitude, she dealt with tenured professors who thought custodians were invisible and doctors who talked over her in hospital rooms. She knew how to hold her ground. The approach. Natalie finished her shift at midnight. But instead of heading to the employee exit, she took the elevator to the restaurant's main floor. The dinner crowd had thinned, but she spotted Harrison Blake immediately. He was still at his table with his 2 friends. All 3 men looking exhausted by their conversation, she walked up to their table. Very aware of her uniform and the curious stares from other patrons, Harrison looked up, clearly expecting restaurant staff with a bill or a question. "Mr. Blake," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "my name is Natalie Rivers. I'd like to accept your bet." The reaction, the 3 men stared at her in stunned silence. Finally, Trevor found his voice. "I'm sorry. How did you? The ventilation system in this building carries sound in unexpected ways," Natalie explained. "I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I heard your conversation. $1 million to spend one night talking with you, being honest, without running away or asking for money. Those were the terms, correct?" Harrison studied her with an intensity that would have made most people uncomfortable. Natalie met his gaze without flinching. She'd spent years watching wealthy people look through her like she was part of the furniture. This time, someone was actually seeing her, even if it was with suspicion. "You work here," Harrison said, not as a question. "I work in the building. Night cleaning crew. I also teach math at a public high school during the day." She didn't mention the architecture degree. "Let him underestimate her, and you won $1 million," he continued, his tone suggesting this proved his entire point about human nature. "I need $1 million, Natalie corrected. "There's a difference. But that's not why I'm accepting your bet." "Then why?" She smiled slightly. "Because I think you're wrong about people, Mr. Blake, and I think someone should prove it to you." Miles let out a surprised laugh. "Oh, I like her already." Harrison's expression remained unreadable. "You understand what you're agreeing to?" "I won't be polite. I won't pretend to be someone I'm not. I'll analyze everything you say and do, point out inconsistencies, question your motivations. Most people can't handle that for an hour, let alone a whole night." "Most people haven't spent years being invisible to people like you," Natalie replied. I've developed a thick skin. Besides, if we're being honest, I'm curious about what makes a man who has everything so convoluted. Everyone wants to take something from him. The agreement, Trevor, cleared his throat. This is still a terrible idea. For both of you. Actually, Miles interjected, I think it might be exactly what Harrison needs. When Harrison pulled out his phone, checking his calendar with the efficiency of someone who scheduled every moment of his life. Tomorrow night, 9 p.m. My penthouse in Tribeca. Looked at Natalie. If you're serious about this, I'm serious. Then I'll need your contact information. And Miss Rivers, wear something comfortable. If we're going to talk all night, you might as well be comfortable. Natalie wrote her number on a napkin from the table, hyper-aware of how surreal this moment was. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern had been covering an extra shift to pay for her father's medication. Now she was making a deal with a billionaire that could change everything. As she walked back to the elevator, she heard Miles say to Harrison, You know, this is going to backfire spectacularly, right? Harrison's response was too quiet to hear, but Natalie smiled to herself. Let him think he had all the control. She'd spent her whole life being underestimated. She knew how to use it to her advantage. By the time she reached the employee locker room to collect her things, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Address is 432 Greenwich Street. Penthouse 1. Security will have your name. Don't be late. HB Natalie saved the number and headed home to tell her father. She might have just made the craziest decision of her life. Or maybe, just maybe, the smartest one. Arriving at the tower, the Tribeca building stood like a glass monument to excess. Its sleek exterior reflecting the Friday night lights of lower Manhattan. Natalie stood on the sidewalk for a full minute, staring up at the structure she'd only seen in architecture magazines. This was the kind of building she'd dreamed of designing back in college, before reality had redirected her path. Miss Rivers? A security guard approached from the entrance. Mr. Blake is expecting you. Please follow me. The lobby was all marble and modern art. The kind of space designed to make visitors feel simultaneously impressed and insignificant. Natalie kept her expression neutral as they rode a private elevator that required a key card for access. The guard handed her a temporary pass and wished her good evening, though his expression suggested he had questions. About why a woman in jeans and a simple sweater was visiting the penthouse at 9 p.m. on a Friday, the elevator opened directly into 7-2 Harrison's apartment, and Natalie had to consciously keep her jaw from dropping. The space was enormous, easily 5,000 square feet, with windows that offered a panoramic view of the Hudson River and the city beyond. The interior was decorated with the kind of minimalist elegance that only serious money could buy: custom furniture, original artwork, technology seamlessly integrated into every surface. The first impression, Harrison stood by the windows. Still dressed in work clothes, though his tie was gone and his shirt sleeves were rolled up. He turned when the elevator chimed, and Natalie caught something unexpected in his expression: nervousness. It vanished quickly, replaced by his usual guarded assessment. But she'd seen it. You came, he said, as if he'd genuinely doubted she would. I said I would. Natalie stepped into the living room, setting her bag on a chair near the entrance. Should we establish ground rules before we start? Harrison raised an eyebrow. You want to negotiate terms? I want to make sure we both understand what we agreed to. You said you'd be honest, but there's honest and there's cruel. I need to know you understand the difference. He poured 2 glasses of water from a pitcher on the counter, offering her one. Explain. Honesty means telling the truth about your thoughts and feelings, Natalie said, accepting the glass. Cruelty means deliberately trying to hurt someone with that truth. You can be direct without being destructive. Setting boundaries, Harrison considered this, and Natalie could see him processing the distinction. Fair enough. What else? Physical boundaries. You don't touch me without permission. I don't touch you without permission. This is a conversation, not anything else. Agreed. And if either of us feels genuinely uncomfortable, not just challenged, but actually unsafe, we can end this without penalty. Harrison nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. My turn for a rule? Go ahead. Complete honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. If I ask you a question, you answer truthfully or tell me you don't want to answer. No deflection, no half-truths. The same applies to me. Natalie extended her hand. Deal. His handshake was firm, professional, and he released her hand quickly. She noticed he seemed more comfortable now that they'd established parameters. Structure made him feel safe. She filed that observation away. The first question, Harrison said, gesturing to the seating area. Let's start with the obvious question. Why did you really accept this bet? Natalie settled onto the couch, noting how carefully he'd chosen a chair across from her rather than sitting beside her. Maintaining distance? I told you. I need the money. My father has cancer. Stage 4 pancreatic. The treatments that might actually help him aren't covered by insurance. And you couldn't just ask me for the money? Would you have given it to me if I'd asked? Harrison paused. Probably not without extensive verification of your story and demands for how the money would be used. Exactly. This way, I'm earning it. There's dignity in that. I'm offering something in exchange. My time. My willingness to engage with you honestly. Proof that your theory about women might be wrong. You think it's wrong? Challenging assumptions, Natalie leaned forward slightly. I think you've created a self-fulfilling prophecy. You meet women in environments where wealth is the primary currency, charity galas, exclusive restaurants, business functions. Then you're surprised when they're interested in your wealth. It's like fishing in a goldfish bowl and concluding all fish are gold. Harrison's lips twitched in what might have been the start of a smile. That's an oversimplification, is it? When was the last time you met someone in a context where your money was irrelevant? A bookstore, a volunteer organization, a public park. I don't have time for public parks. And there's your problem, Natalie said gently. You've built a life where money determines everything. Where you go, who you meet, how you spend your time. Then you blame women for being interested in the only thing you're willing to show them. The observation hit harder than Harrison expected, and Natalie saw him bristle slightly. Good, if this was going to work. She needed to push him out of his comfort zone. You don't know anything about my life? He said, his tone cooling. You're right. I don't. So tell me, what was Harrison Blake like before the billions? Who were you when you were just another programmer with dreams? Arriving at the tower, the Tribeca building stood like a glass monument to excess, its sleek exterior reflecting the Friday night lights of lower Manhattan. Natalie stood on the sidewalk for a full minute, staring up at the structure she'd only seen in architecture magazines. This was the kind of building she'd dreamed of designing back in college, before reality had redirected her path. Miss Rivers? A security guard approached from the entrance. Mr. Blake is expecting you. Please follow me. The lobby was all marble and modern art, the kind of space designed to make visitors feel simultaneously impressed and insignificant. Natalie kept her expression neutral as they rode a private elevator that required a key card for access. The guard handed her a temporary pass and wished her good evening, though his expression suggested he had questions. About why a woman in jeans and a simple sweater was visiting the penthouse at 9 p.m. on a Friday, the elevator opened directly into 7-2 Harrison's apartment, and Natalie had to consciously keep her jaw from dropping. The space was enormous, easily 5,000 square feet, with windows that offered a panoramic view of the Hudson River and the city beyond. The interior was decorated with the kind of minimalist elegance that only serious money could buy, custom furniture. Original artwork, technology seamlessly integrated into every surface. The first impression, Harrison stood by the windows. Still dressed in work clothes, though his tie was gone and his shirt sleeves were rolled up. He turned when the elevator chimed, and Natalie caught something unexpected in his expression. Nervousness. It vanished quickly, replaced by his usual guarded assessment. But she'd seen it. You came, he said, as if he'd genuinely doubted she would. I said I would. Natalie stepped into the living room, setting her bag on a chair near the entrance. Should we establish ground rules before we start? Harrison raised an eyebrow. You want to negotiate terms? I want to make sure we both understand what we agreed to. You said you'd be honest, But there's honest and there's cruel. I need to know you understand the difference. He poured 2 glasses of water from a pitcher on the counter, offering her one. Explain. Honesty means telling the truth about your thoughts and feelings, Natalie said, accepting the glass. Cruelty means deliberately trying to hurt someone with that truth. You can be direct without being destructive. Setting boundaries, Harrison considered this, and Natalie could see him processing the distinction. Fair enough. What else? Physical boundaries. You don't touch me without permission. I don't touch you without permission. This is a conversation, not anything else. Agreed. And if either of us feels genuinely uncomfortable, not just challenged but actually unsafe, we can end this without penalty. Harrison nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. My turn for a rule, go ahead. Complete honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. If I ask you a question, you answer truthfully, or tell me you don't want to answer. No deflection, no half-truths. The same applies to me. Natalie extended her hand. Deal. His handshake was firm, professional, and he released her hand quickly. She noticed he seemed more comfortable now that they'd established parameters. Structure made him feel safe. She filed that observation away. The first question, so, Harrison said, gesturing to the seating area. Let's start with the obvious question. Why did you really accept this bet? Natalie settled onto the couch, noting how carefully he'd chosen a chair across from her rather than sitting beside her. Maintaining distance. I told you. I need the money. My father has cancer. Stage 4 pancreatic. The treatments that might actually help him aren't covered by insurance. And you couldn't just ask me for the money. Would you have given it to me if I'd asked? Harrison paused. Probably not without extensive verification of your story and demands for how the money would be used. Exactly. This way, I'm earning it. There's dignity in that. I'm offering something in exchange. My time, my willingness to engage with you honestly, proof that your theory about women might be wrong. You think it's wrong? Challenging assumptions, Natalie leaned forward slightly. I think you've created a self-fulfilling prophecy. You meet women in environments where wealth is the primary currency. Charity galas, exclusive restaurants, business functions. Then you're surprised when they're interested in your wealth. It's like fishing in a goldfish bowl and concluding all fish are gold. Harrison's lips twitched in what might have been the start of a smile. That's an oversimplification, is it? When was the last time you met someone in a context where your money was irrelevant? A bookstore? A volunteer organization? A public park? I don't have time for public parks. And there's your problem, Natalie said gently. You've built a life where money determines everything, where you go, who you meet, how you spend your time. Then you blame women for being interested in the only thing you're willing to show them. The observation hit harder than Harrison expected, and Natalie saw him bristle slightly. Good, if this was going to work. She needed to push him out of his comfort zone. You don't know anything about my life, he said, his tone cooling. You're right. I don't. So tell me. What was Harrison Blake like before the billions? Who were you when you were just another programmer with dreams? Opening up, Harrison stood and walked to the windows. Classic avoidance behavior. Natalie waited patiently. Silence didn't make her uncomfortable. She'd learned from her father that sometimes the most important conversations happened in the quiet spaces. I was hungry, Harrison finally said. Not for food, though there were months when I lived on ramen. Hungry to build something that mattered. To prove that I could take an idea and turn it into reality. And you did. I did. Blake Industries started in a garage apartment in Brooklyn. Just me and my laptop writing code 16 hours a day. I barely slept. I definitely didn't date. Every thought was focused on making the software work, making it better, making it essential. When did that change? Harrison turned from the window. When did what change? When did building something that mattered become about proving something to other people? The question clearly caught him off guard. What makes you think it did? The psychology of success, Natalie set down her water glass. Because nobody works themselves to exhaustion out of pure love for their work. That's passion. What you're describing sounds more like running from something or chasing something. Which was it? Harrison returned to his chair, and this time he actually looked at her, really looked at her. You're perceptive. I'm observant. There's a difference. Being perceptive requires understanding. I'm just noticing patterns. Both, I think, Harrison admitted. Running and chasing. My father was a high school teacher. Good man. But he always had this sadness about him. Like he'd wanted more from life, but settled for less. I didn't want that. I wanted to build something so successful that nobody could ever accuse me of settling. And your mother? His expression hardened. Left when I was 12. Apparently being married to a high school teacher wasn't the life she'd signed up for. She remarried within a year to a stockbroker, sent birthday cards for a few years, then stopped pretending she cared. There it was. Natalie felt the pieces clicking into place. A mother who'd left for money. A father who'd represented settling. No wonder Harrison was so conflicted about wealth and relationships. So you proved you weren't your father, Natalie said quietly. You built an empire. But somewhere along the way, you started believing that everyone would leave you like your mother did if you weren't rich enough, successful enough, powerful enough. Confronting truth that's amateur psychology, Harrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. That doesn't make it wrong. Harrison stood again, this time moving to the kitchen area. He pulled out ingredients for coffee, his movements precise and controlled. You want to know why I really made this bet? Yes, because I'm tired. He measured coffee grounds with exact precision. Tired of pretending that I'm wrong about people? Tired of hoping that maybe the next woman will be different? Tired of the disappointment when they're not? At least if I prove I'm right, I can stop hoping. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard, Natalie said, and she meant it. Harrison looked up sharply. I ask for honesty, not pity. That was genuine sadness for you. There's a difference. She joined him in the kitchen, leaning against the counter. You've turned cynicism into a comfort zone. It's safer to believe everyone will disappoint you because then you're never surprised. But you're also never connected. Never truly known. And do you think you can know me after one night? I think I already know more about you than most people who've been in your life for years. Sharing stories, the coffee began to brew, filling the apartment with its rich aroma. Harrison poured 2 cups, and they moved to the balcony, stepping out into the cool October night. The city sprawled beneath them, millions of lives being lived in the buildings below. Tell me about your father, Harrison said. Not his illness. Who he is as a person. Natalie smiled, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. Robert Rivers. He's the strongest person I know, and I don't mean physically, though he was incredibly strong before the cancer. I mean emotionally. My mom died when I was 8. Brain aneurysm. Completely unexpected. One day she was making pancakes for breakfast. The next day she was gone. I'm sorry. Dad could have fallen apart. A lot of men would have. Single father with an 8-year-old daughter, working construction, no family nearby. But he didn't. He learned to braid hair by watching YouTube videos. He joined the PTA. He showed up to every school event, covered in sawdust with paint under his fingernails. But he was always there. He sounds remarkable. The weight of love he is, Natalie said, her voice thick with emotion. Which is why this year has been so hard. Watching cancer take him apart piece by piece. He tries to hide how much pain he's in, but I can see it. And the worst part is knowing that there are treatments that might help, might give him more time, but we can't afford them. Is that why you gave up architecture? Natalie looked at him in surprise. How did you know about that? You mentioned teaching math at a high school. But the way you looked at this building when you arrived. The way you've been studying the architectural details of this apartment. You're not just interested in buildings. You understand them, Columbia. Graduated 4 years ago. Did an internship with Morrison and Associates. Had a job offer from them. Then Dad got diagnosed. The insurance covered basics, but experimental treatments, specialized care, they're all out of pocket. I couldn't take the entry-level architecture position and afford his care. So I teach, which has better benefits and more predictable hours, and I clean offices at night for extra income. How? Do you resent him? The blunt question would have offended Natalie coming from anyone else, but she understood Harrison was testing her honesty. Sometimes, not him, exactly, but the situation. I resent that good people suffer while others have more money than they could spend in 10 lifetimes. I resent that my education feels wasted. I resent missing out on building the career I dreamed about. Vulnerability shared, but, Harrison prompted. But I don't regret my choice. Resentment and regret are different things. I can be frustrated with my circumstances and still know I made the right decision. Love requires sacrifice. That's not noble or heroic. It's just what you do for people who matter. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. I don't think I've ever loved anyone that way. Not even Rebecca. His head snapped toward her. How do you know about Rebecca? Your friend mentioned her last night at the restaurant. I may have been in the maintenance corridor, but sound carries. It wasn't hard to figure out she was significant. Harrison set his coffee cup on the balcony railing. Rebecca was 10 years ago. We met in college. She was an art history major. I was drowning in computer science coursework. She made me feel like maybe there was more to life than code and startups. What happened? Blake Industries happened. We got engaged right after I graduated. The company was still small, but growing fast. When we went public 2 years later, everything changed. Suddenly, we had money. Real money. Rebecca started wanting things. A bigger apartment. A house in the Hamptons. Designer clothes. Cars. I thought that's what she wanted, so I gave it to her. The past revealed, but it wasn't what she wanted, Natalie guessed. No, she wanted me. The version of me who stayed up late talking about philosophy and took walks in Central Park and noticed when she got her hair cut. I'd become so focused on building the company that I forgot to build our relationship. When I found out she'd been seeing someone else, I was devastated, but also confused. I'd given her everything money could buy. Except yourself. Except myself, Harrison agreed. And instead of learning that lesson, I decided the problem was that money had corrupted her. That if I'd stayed poor, she would have stayed faithful. So I started testing every woman I met, looking for signs they were interested in my wealth. And surprise, I always found them. Natalie turned to face him fully. Do you see the pattern? Your mother left your father for someone richer. Rebecca left you when you became too focused on making money. Now, you use your money as a shield. Keeping people at a distance while simultaneously blaming them for being interested in the only thing you're willing to share? The turning point, when did this become therapy? Harrison asked, but there was no heat in his voice. When you decided to be honest about what's really going on? That's what tonight is supposed to be about, right? Truth. Harrison moved back inside, and Natalie followed. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, more intimate. He sat on the couch this time, and after a moment's hesitation, she sat on the other end, maintaining respectful distance. Can I ask you something personal? Harrison said. That's the agreement. Why haven't you dated? Someone smart, kind, attractive like you? There must have been opportunities. Natalie laughed softly. You think I have time to date? Between teaching, night shifts, and spending every free moment I have with my father? Besides, what do I have to offer someone right now? Hey, want to date a woman who's exhausted all the time, has no money, and whose idea of a fun Saturday night is sitting in a hospital room? You're more than your circumstances. So are you, Natalie said pointedly. But circumstances shape us, whether we want them to or not. The difference is, I'm trying not to let mine make me bitter. Breaking down walls, the hours passed without them noticing. They talked about everything. Childhood memories, college experiences, career dreams, failures, and regrets. Harrison opened up about the pressure of running a massive company, the loneliness of being responsible for thousands of employees, the fear that one wrong decision could destroy everything he'd built, Natalie shared. Her struggles with feeling invisible in a world that judged people by their bank accounts, the frustration of being educated but underemployed, the guilt she felt when she caught herself wishing her life were different. Around 3 a.m, Harrison made them sandwiches because neither had eaten dinner. They ate in companionable silence on the balcony, watching the city that never truly slept. I don't think I've talked to anyone like this in years, Harrison admitted. Maybe ever. It's amazing what happens when you let your guard down. Terrifying, too. The best things usually are. The dawn approaches as the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. They moved back inside. Natalie felt the exhaustion of a sleepless night catching up with her, but she didn't want the conversation to end. Something had shifted between them, some fundamental understanding that hadn't existed before. "It's almost sunrise," Harrison observed, checking his watch. "You made it through the night. You won the bet. That's not why I stayed." He looked at her intently. "Why did you stay?" "Because somewhere around midnight, this stopped being about a bet. It became about two people actually seeing each other. I stayed because I wanted to." Harrison moved closer, but maintained the respectful distance they'd established. "I need to tell you something. I'm listening. I hoped you'd leave. Not because I wanted to win the money back, but because, if you left, it would prove I was right. It would be easier, safe." He took a breath. "But you didn't leave. And now I don't know what to do with that." Honest confession, Natalie stood, facing him directly. "You do what anyone does when their theory is proven wrong. You adjust your thinking. You admit that maybe you've been protecting yourself from pain so successfully that you've also protected yourself from genuine connection. And then what? Then you decide if you're brave enough to try something different." The sun broke over the horizon, flooding the apartment with golden light. They stood in that light, to people from completely different worlds who'd found unexpected. Common ground and honesty. Harrison pulled out his phone and made a transfer. Natalie's phone buzzed with a notification. $1 million deposited into her account. "You won," he said simply. Natalie looked at the notification, tears forming in her eyes. This money would save her father. It would give them more time. It was everything she'd hoped for. But as she looked at Harrison, she realized she'd gained something else entirely. The morning after, Natalie stared at her phone. The number on the screen, almost too large to comprehend. $1 million. Her father's treatments were now possible. The house would be saved. She could breathe for the first time in months. But when she looked up at Harrison, money wasn't what occupied her thoughts. "Thank you," she said quietly. "This changes everything for my family." Harrison nodded, but his expression was uncertain, vulnerable in a way she suspected few people ever saw. "The bet is settled. You don't owe me anything, I know. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." Natalie set her phone aside, giving him her full attention. Always. The real question. Harrison moved to the window, watching the city wake up below them. "Everything we talked about tonight, was any of it real? Or were you just saying what you thought I needed to hear to win the money?" The question hurt, but Natalie understood why he had to ask it. Trust didn't come easily to people who'd been betrayed. "Look at me," she said. He turned. "If I'd wanted to manipulate you for money, I would have been agreeable, flattering, everything you expected. I challenged you. I called out your patterns. I made you uncomfortable. Does that sound like manipulation to you?" "No," Harrison admitted. "It sounds like someone who actually gave a damn about truth." "This entire night was real," Natalie continued. "My interest in you as a person, my observations, my willingness to be vulnerable in return. The money makes my life easier, but it's not why I stayed until dawn." "Then why did you?" Natalie crossed the space between them, stopping close enough to matter, but far enough to maintain the boundaries they'd established. "Because somewhere in the past 8 hours, I started to care about what happens to you, and that terrifies me as much as it probably terrifies you." Mutual fear. Harrison's expression softened. "Why does it terrify you?" "Because I don't have room in my life for complications right now. My focus needs to be on my father, on his treatment, on making sure I use this money wisely. Getting emotionally involved with someone, especially someone whose life is so vastly different from mine, that's a distraction I can't afford. So what do we do?" Natalie took a deep breath. "I think we both need to be honest about what this was and what it could be. This was an extraordinary night under extraordinary circumstances. We connected because we were both raw and real. But we don't really know each other. Not in the way that builds lasting relationships. You're saying we should walk away? I'm saying we shouldn't make decisions based on one intense night. You need time to process whether what you're feeling is genuine, interest, or just relief that someone finally saw past your defenses. And I need time to focus on my father without the complication of trying to navigate a relationship with a billionaire. Setting terms. Harrison processed this, and Natalie could see him wrestling with disappointment and understanding. That's probably wise. But Natalie added, watching his head snap up at the word, I'm not saying never. I'm saying not right now. What are you proposing? Give me 3 months. 3 months to get my father started on treatment, to adjust to having financial stability, to think clearly about what I want instead of what I need. You take that same time to figure out if what you felt tonight was about me specifically or just about the relief of being understood by someone. Harrison considered this. And after 3 months? After 3 months, if you still want to explore this, you really explore it without the pressure of a bet or the intensity of one night, then we can talk. We can date like normal people. Coffee, movies, actual getting to know you time. And if one of us realizes it was just the circumstances, then we're honest about it, and we go our separate ways with gratitude for what this night taught us both. The agreement. Harrison extended his hand. 3 months. No contact unless it's an emergency. Clean break to think clearly. Natalie shook his hand, holding it perhaps a moment longer than necessary. 3 months. Then we decide if we're brave enough to try something real. I have one condition, Harrison added. What's that? If you need anything during these 3 months, for your father's treatment, for any complication that comes up, you call me. The money was from the bet, but that doesn't mean I can't help if you need it. Natalie smiled. That's very kind, but I need to do this on my own. Part of proving to myself that I'm not with you for your resources? Fair enough. Parting ways as Natalie gathered her things, Harrison called down to his driver, At least let me have someone take you home. You haven't slept all night that I'll accept? In the elevator down to the lobby, they stood in silence. Just before the doors opened, Harrison spoke. Thank you, Natalie. For proving me wrong, for seeing me, for being honest. Thank you for being brave enough to let me try. The car was waiting outside, a simple sedan rather than a flashy luxury vehicle. Harrison had remembered her comment about not wanting to draw attention in her neighborhood. The small gesture meant more to Natalie than he probably realized. Coming home, the drive to her apartment took 30 minutes through. Saturday morning traffic. Natalie dozed in the back seat, exhausted but with a strange peace settling over her. When they arrived at her building, she thanked the driver and climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment. Her father was already awake. Sitting at their small kitchen table with tea and the newspaper, just like every morning for as long as she could remember. You're home late, Robert Rivers said, looking up with concern. Everything okay? Natalie sat down across from him, reaching for his weathered hand. Dad, I need to tell you something, and I need you not to freak out. That's never a good way to start a conversation. She told him everything. The overheard bet, her impulsive decision to accept, the night-long conversation with Harrison, and finally, the $1 million deposit in her account. She showed him her phone as proof. A father's wisdom. Robert was quiet for a long time, processing the information. Finally, he spoke. And this man, Harrison, did he treat you with respect? He did. More than respect. He actually listened. Dad really listened. And you like him. It wasn't a question. Natalie smiled ruefully. I barely know him. But yes, I think I could like him if we give it a real chance. Then why do you look sad? Because I told him we needed 3 months apart? To make sure this wasn't just circumstance and intensity creating false feelings. Robert squeezed her hand. That's very mature of you. And very hard. Is it the right choice? Only you can answer that, sweetheart. But I'll tell you what I know. Your mother and I fell in love in 3 days. 3 days at a community center summer program. Everyone said it was too fast, that we were too young, that it wouldn't last. We had 32 years together before she died, and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Wisdom and hope, so you think I should have taken the chance? I think Robert said carefully that love is always a risk. Fast or slow, rich or poor, it all requires the same leap of faith. But I also think you're being smart by taking time to be sure. If it's real, 3 months won't change that. If it's not, 3 months will make that clear.
When did you get so wise?
When I became a single father and realized I had to raise a daughter to be strong enough to make hard choices, Natalie felt tears forming. Dad, this money means we can try the immunotherapy treatment. Dr. Patterson said it's showing real promise for cases like yours. Robert's eyes glistened. I know what you did to get that money. Standing up to a billionaire, spending all night proving a point. That's my girl. Brave and stubborn. I learned from the best. 3 months of change, the following 3 months transformed Natalie's life in ways she couldn't have imagined. Her father started treatment immediately. And while it was too early to declare success, his energy improved and the pain lessened. The relief of not worrying about money was almost overwhelming at first. She cut back to just teaching, leaving the night cleaning job behind. With normal hours, she started reconnecting with old friends from architecture school, going to lectures and exhibits, remembering who she was beyond a caretaker and wage earner. But through it all, she thought about Harrison. She wondered if he was thinking about her too. She resisted the urge to look him up online, to see what business deals he was making or events he was attending. This was a clean break, a necessary pause. Harrison's journey, meanwhile. Across the city, Harrison was experiencing his own transformation. The night with Natalie had cracked something open inside him, and he couldn't close it again. He started therapy, something he'd always dismissed as unnecessary. Dr. Jennifer Wu, a no-nonsense psychologist specializing in high achievers, didn't let him hide behind his success. You've spent 10 years building walls, she told him in their third session. Walls made of cynicism, suspicion, and controlled isolation. Natalie didn't climb over those walls. She showed you there was a door you'd forgotten existed. Harrison also changed how he spent his free time. He volunteered at a coding boot camp for underprivileged teens, remembering his own hungry early days. He said no to social events that felt performative and yes to activities that actually interested him. He read books, Natalie had mentioned, visited museums she'd talked about, tried to see the world through eyes that valued connection over transaction, and every day he resisted the urge to call her. This was her time, her space to heal and grow. If 3 months felt like an eternity, that just proved how much he needed this break too. The calendar's end, and the first day of the 4th month, Saturday morning in January, Natalie woke up knowing it was time. 3 months had passed. The terms of their agreement allowed contact again. She drafted and deleted a dozen text messages before finally settling on something simple. The 3 months are up. Coffee tomorrow if you're interested. The place in Roma Norte mentioned. 2 p.m. No pressure, if you've moved on. She hit send before she could overthink it. The response came 10 minutes later. I'll be there. The reunion in the cafe was crowded with weekend regulars, and Natalie secured a table by the window. She arrived 15 minutes early, out of nervousness. Ordered a coffee she didn't really want, and tried to read a book that didn't hold her attention. When Harrison walked in, her breath caught. He looked different. Less severe somehow. He wore jeans and a sweater, and his expression was more open than she remembered. He spotted her immediately, and his face broke into a genuine smile that transformed him. Hi, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. Hi yourself. They stared at each other for a moment, and then they both started laughing at the awkwardness of it. Starting fresh. This is weird, right? Natalie said, we had the most intense conversation of our lives, and didn't speak for 3 months, and now we're supposed to date like normal people? Completely weird, Harrison agreed. But also kind of perfect. We did everything backward. So why not continue the pattern? A server came by, and Harrison ordered coffee. When they were alone again, he leaned forward. Tell me about the last 3 months. How's your father? Natalie's face lit up. He's responding to treatment. It's still early, but his doctors are cautiously optimistic. He's got his energy back. We even took a weekend trip to Guadalajara last month, just the 2 of us. First vacation we've had in 5 years. That's wonderful. Really. And I've been reconnecting with architecture, Natalie continued. Not working yet, but designing for fun. Thinking about what I might want to do when I'm ready to enter the field again. And are you ready? Getting there. What about you? How have your 3 months been? Honest Progressor San took a sip of his coffee. Eye-opening. I started therapy. Turned out I had some issues to work through. Natalie smiled. Shocking. My therapist says I use sarcasm as a defense mechanism. Your therapist is very perceptive. They grinned at each other, and the easiness of it felt like coming home. I also started volunteering, Harrison continued. Teaching coding to kids who can't afford fancy boot camps. It reminded me why I got into this business in the first place. Not to make money, but to build things that matter. That's beautiful. And I thought about you, Harrison admitted. Every day. Wondered if you were thinking about me, too. Every day, Natalie confirmed. The real first date, they spent 3 hours in that cafe, talking about everything and nothing. Politics and favorite movies, childhood memories, and hopes for the future. It was normal, casual, completely different from their intense first night. And yet the connection was still there when the cafe started getting ready to close. They walked through Roma Nort together, Harrison seeing the neighborhood through Natalie's eyes. She pointed out architectural details he'd never noticed. Told stories about the history of different buildings, made the city feel new and interesting. Can I see you again? Harrison asked when they reached her building. I'd like that. Next week. Dinner? Somewhere low-key where we can actually talk? Perfect. Harrison started to leave, then turned back. Natalie. Yes. Thank you for giving this a chance. For giving me a chance to do this right. She stepped forward and hugged him, brief but genuine. Thank you for being willing to try. Building something real over the next few months, they dated properly. Dinners and museums. Walks in Central Park and movie nights, where Harrison learned that Natalie loved horror films and he discovered he did too when he wasn't worried about being cool. They met each other's friends. Harrison charmed her father with his genuine interest in Robert's construction stories. Natalie impressed Trevor and Miles with her quick wit and refusal to be intimidated by wealth.